Thank you, Jamie, for agreeing to talk with me. What we want to talk about is how human services relate to men and whether there are any improvements that can be made in the way they relate to men. Now, it was about 4 years ago when your daughter was taken into care, and she was in care for about 9 months before she returned to your care. And during that time, you formed some pretty strong opinions about human services and how they worked and how they didn't appear to be very father-friendly. I wondered if we can start with practical issues. What were some of the obstacles that you found?
Okay, well, from the start, I noticed that when I first had contact with Child Safety, there was actually no information put forward to me as to how the case would roll. So I pretty much left the office on the first day with not even knowing anything about what I was in for, who I was to speak to, how to get information, and then noticed that in a very short time this department wasn't male friendly in regards to the hours that it kept. And I found it very difficult, almost impossible to keep a job, because all their hours was all office hours. Any of the visitation that I would in the future get with my daughter would be in office hours. And pretty much most males have 8 to 5 jobs, so I just couldn't keep a job down. It was near impossible. And then there was all the appointments, contacts that they wanted you to keep, and they just rolled on and on. So if I was working, I'd have to take days off work on a regular basis.
This was a big frustration you had right from the start with Child Safety. But I understand there were also other organisations and agencies that you had to have dealings with that added to your frustration, and that perhaps you felt Child Safety didn't really understand about this mounting pressure on you across the board.
Yeah, well, I then started seeking legal advice, which really didn't give me any positives. It seemed to be like a minefield there as well. So I then tried to seek advice from all departments or services that I thought would be of assistance, but they never really offered me any good advice or support either. So the more this rolled on, the more frustrated I got, the more powerless I started to feel. So it just all compounded on top of each other. I then started finding that when you mentioned you were dealing with child safety with anyone within your circle, there was they tended to pull back and really started thinking the worst and starting to think that you were some sort of animal if you are dealing with child safety. So any support that I did previously have just melted away.
You felt, though, that Child Safety didn't understand how you were not getting support from anywhere else and feeling isolated. And how did they react?
Yeah, I found that in a short time they didn't understand the frustrations I was going through. I tried to relay this back to them and they didn't, although I had an answer for pretty much everything I asked for, but promised the world, delivered nothing, and it just got more and more frustrating. I felt more and more powerless the more I dealt with them. They give me very little contact with my daughter. The court system started and it just rolled on, adjournment after adjournment. It just didn't look as though it was going anywhere. And in the meantime I was falling behind with my bills. relationships weren't going very well with anyone. They had pretty much told my mother that she couldn't have much to do with it because they felt that she was supporting and agreeing with everything that I was doing. So they put her in the no-go basket as well. So that made me angry that they were treating her that way. It just seemed to snowball to the next.
It didn't take very long before Child Safety started considering you a very angry man and relating to you as a threat. And what happened then?
Yeah, no time it took before they started to pretty much tell me I was an angry man, which didn't help matters at all either. I really started feeling embarrassed, but it started to get angrier with the system and the supports or the no support that was there. Just frustrated me all the more. I just didn't have anyone to talk to. Like even the police were assuming things just from every angle. I just felt like my life had just was over. I just started feeling like I had nothing to lose, really. I didn't feel like I was ever going to get out of this hole that I've managed to get into. I was getting frustrations from every direction. Still having to, my bills were getting behind more and more, so that was another frustration. I really started thinking that I might not have to ever deal with it. I wasn't really going to be there to worry about it. So that put me in another level then that not only was I angry, but I was pretty much thinking that it was all over anyway, so I felt like I had nothing to lose at that stage. So the anger had got to now a point that it was beyond anger. I couldn't even express the anger that I had from that stage, and then started to, on odd occasions, meet other people that were in the same situation, and then when I'd hear their situation it would make me even angrier to hear that they had similar things happening, and I could see that the system was very flawed and didn't seem to have any support. But as for the male population, it tended to have less support than what the females did, and I just couldn't find anyone that could relate to how I was feeling.
You were in a pretty desperate position, and you felt that Child Safety didn't understand that and didn't support you through it. But there did come a point where things started to change. Can you say something about what factors were most important in turning things around?
Yeah, I had become an angry, dangerous person, I believe, and just out of the blue, things did start to turn around. I happened to be at the courthouse one day there, and a woman approached me and explained that she was from a group called Finn, which I'd never heard of, no one had ever mentioned, and said that she was there to help people that were dealing with child safety, and I just basically thought it was a joke because I didn't believe anyone was out there to help me. It was actually to that extreme. I just pretty much laughed at the woman and said, I don't believe you. And she proceeded to explain that she was from Finn and that she was definitely there to try and help people through the process. Couldn't believe my luck. I was very interested. So she told me to come along to a meeting. So that was the first stage of things changing. Then probably the next thing to change for the department side of things, I had gone through multiple different workers, and the attitudes from one to the other was pretty much similar, as though they'd almost schooled each other on how bad a person I was. They didn't even come in with open eyes, they just assumed that what they'd been told was correct. So, but out of the blue, I got this new worker that I believe was from another department down south. I first spoke to her on the phone, and I pretty much started talking to her the same way I'd spoken to all the other workers from the department, because I just assumed that she was the same. We'd started to get on a bad foot, and then I got a feeling that she was just talking slightly differently. So then I said to her, look, we've got off on the wrong foot, can I at least come into the office and meet you and start off fresh? And we both agreed to that, and from that moment on, that really changed things. She met me, she gave me a chance, she listened to what I had to say, and it did start to turn around. I then continued to have contact with Finn, which allowed me to explain myself. I could talk to people that didn't seem to judge me. I talked to other people that were in similar or sometimes worse situations. I could start to see some way forward. So it really started to calm me down. Each time I went to one of the meetings, I felt calmer and calmer. I could go there and tell them, explain where I was at. And then I started getting some support at my meetings with child support. I didn't feel alone, I didn't feel on my own. I felt like I was on an equal footing. I didn't feel like it was a David and Goliath story. It felt a lot more even. And I noticed the department weren't on their high horses much either. They were a bit more careful as to how they spoke to me, I felt. And it just started to settle down, and proceeded to get better.
Perhaps you could say a little bit more about what was different about the new worker. What did she do differently? And then what you think we can learn from this to make suggestions for what all workers might do differently?
Well, just right from the start, her choices of words that she chose to speak to me with, and the way in which she just listened and allowed me to explain the situation that I got myself into. It was because it wasn't something that could be explained in 5 minutes. I had a fairly complicated situation that I'd found myself in. So in the past, for every little bit that I tried to explain to other workers, they had an answer for it. It was as almost they'd been schooled up on an answer for everything. She she just allowed me that time to explain why I was where I was and how it had become that way. And by doing that, we could slowly work through the situations, and it allowed her time to make her valuation on what I was doing and where I was at. And it allowed me to be more open and honest with her.
Right.
Because prior to that, I kept putting more and more walls up. It got to the point where I wasn't going to tell him anything. That was where I was at, and I think that's particularly a male thing. Males can tend to do that. If they feel like it's not worthy or not worthwhile, we just don't bother. So she really did tend to give me a bit of leeway and understood, I think, the way a male worked, and she didn't have that. I didn't intimidate her, or she didn't feel intimidated by me. And I don't know whether it was because she's come from an area where she's used to that, or what. She just was different. She just seemed to treat me with more respect and allowed me to be a bit more open and honest, and it was more of a two-way street.
If you could give one or two or a few more key messages to workers about how they might better engage with fathers, particularly in statutory contexts like child safety, what would those messages be?
After I started thinking about the situation and meeting this new worker that had a totally different outlook on the way she viewed me, I started seeing that it was a predominantly female workforce that I was dealing with, and I tried to put myself in their shoes and realised that the majority of men that they would be meeting would most probably be upset and angry in their own way. So I felt that they may be scared and afraid of men and were putting up barriers to protect themselves from men. And so it didn't give them a chance to actually get to know you, because they were often afraid of you from what they'd read already, anything that had been written about you. So when the new worker come on the scene and gave me that chance to allow me to express myself and explain myself, it made me feel more calmer and collected. So it just rolled on from there.
So what are the lessons that can be learned from that experience of yours? What would you suggest others could do differently in working with men?
Well, I think it's a delicate balance, but they need to give men probably a little bit more time to calm down, give them some more information as to what they need to do, and probably the next issue was that any promises or any things that the department would tell you, they need to follow through with that. I found that it would just be one disappointment after another. Nothing ever rolled the way it was told to me that it was going to happen. So the more time that was allowed for me to explain myself, and the more they followed through with their promises or their next stumbling block or
the plan.
The plan that they were putting forward. The more that proceeded, the more I could see that there was at least some light at the end of the tunnel. And your children are only young, so just when time just seems to roll on so slow through the system, someone else has got your child, and you're just missing them. You just want them home. Their birthdays come and go, a Christmas can come and go, all the different things that you look forward to through the years, you just see them come and go. You watch everyone else around you going through all these things and doing all these things with their children, and all you can think of is, well, someone else is doing that with your child. So none of that's really understood. I think they try to put up a barrier for themselves so that they don't feel
your pain.
Feel my pain, yeah.
But they need to feel your pain, or to understand it.
Possibly understand it. Yeah. It was almost, I think, to the degree where you go to a funeral and the staff there have almost a blank face on. It's as though they're not there.
So, is there anything else you'd like to say, to convey to workers in child safety about what they need to do differently?
Well, summing it up, the only other, when I've sat back and thought about it, I started to not understand why they didn't get that I was angry, because I loved my daughter so much and I missed her so much. Every action, whether it be negative or positive, that I did, perceived to come across as a problem for them. They just never seemed to acknowledge that I was there, and I was obviously very upset and missed her a lot. So I just couldn't understand that they didn't see that point. They just seen me as a problem, and it was almost as if they wished the problem would just go away. And I, as a male, I felt that the easy way out for me would be to just walk away from it. But I held in there, but it never really was told to me that that they appreciated or could see that I was doing the right thing by hanging in there. It just seemed to get harder and harder for a long time. So that was frustrating, and also added to my anger that they just didn't ever acknowledge that I was angry because...
And if they had acknowledged it, might that have been a turning point?
Yeah, I it'd probably make me feel more understood anyway. And all the other parents that I met that were in similar situations that were angry, I could understand why they were angry. I just couldn't understand why a department with people in it at the other side of the counter couldn't understand that concept.
Mm.